Sporting Journal Radio, presented by Onyx.
Well, a couple of important topics are going to be discussed on the show today. We've got David Eckhart right over there, Dan Amundsen. My name is Brett Amundsen, and we're going to bring Sam Soholt on the show right now. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Now, I want to talk to you about a few things because, A, you went to a really cool destination recently that I think it's not really on my bucket list, but it's on my list, right? It's on my radar. I think it'd be amazing. I've never really, one time I thought about going there to hunt mallards, I think at one point. So I want to talk about where that is, what you did there, what the logistics of getting there would be, and why somebody watching or listening to this would want to go to that place. I also want to talk turkey, of course, because 'tis the season, right? And if you look right now, though, if you look out the window, it does not look like turkey season. And I want to talk about your thoughts on hunting turkeys in the snow or, a real late spring like we're having and what effect that's going to have on the birds. There's a podcast out that you're a part of talking about turkeys. We'll talk about all of that. But most importantly, I think a real important discussion to have right now is about hunting access. And with some of the different regulations taking place in different states and provinces that are, lowering the number of non-resident hunting licenses or tags or whatever, is that going to protect the resource? Is that going to protect it for residents? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it going to further reduce access for hunters out there and therefore reduce hunting opportunities, hunter numbers? I want to dig into all of that. So thanks for joining us. How's it going, man?
I'm good. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. It's good to be back in the U.S. But yeah, I just had a great trip. So,
well, you went to New Zealand, and
yes,
man, that had to be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you said it's just on your radar and not specifically on your bucket list, but I think you need to add it to your bucket list because it's just such a cool spot. I've been there. This is my third time there. The last couple times I went, first time I went was in long time ago now, 2014 for a photo shoot. And then I went back in 17 for another photo shoot with Yeti. And both of those were like hunt related, fish related. And this time, my beautiful wife and I got to go down for 3 weeks for our delayed honeymoon. So we got married fall of 2019. And our plan was to go in 2020, but the world shut down. So, and New Zealand was really strict. I mean, they were closed borders for a couple years. And then they finally opened back up about a year ago and then kind of kept lifting restrictions. So we were able to go and we had to spend 3 weeks down there just doing everything we possibly could, just rented a car and spent 3 weeks on the South Island.
Is this you bungee jumping, by the way?
That is me bungee jumping. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh man, it's so much fun. So,
all right. Well, I want to wait on this trip. I want to come back to it.
Yeah.
But just real quick about the COVID deal in New Zealand. I remember that when that happened, and New Zealand kind of made the news because they did completely shut all the borders down.
Yep.
Before some other countries and other places did. But, you think an isolated-ish island out there, shutting down the borders, don't let anybody in or out. It's a pretty good plan. And then one person got it. If I remember, one person tested positive for COVID, and they're like, what? How did that, it made news around the world because everyone's like, oh, New Zealand has got everything closed. And they had one person get it.
Yep. Yeah, it was, they took drastic measures. And I think a lot of that comes from being an island culture, right? I mean, they're strict on a lot of things. So if anybody has traveled there or is planning to travel there, like if you bring camping equipment, hunting, fishing equipment, when you go through customs, you have to declare all that. And then they check your boots, they check your tent, they check everything for plant matter, mud, dirt, because they don't want you to haul in like any sort of invasive species like seeds or whatever. So I think their approach to COVID was probably not that much different from everything else they've done with just really trying to protect their island ecosystem, I guess. Sure. That's kind of the way I saw it.
Well, they've kind of got their own ecosystem there, when you're literally on an island. So it's good to protect that. Well, I want to find out more about what you did there a little bit later in the show. But before we get into that, let's talk turkeys because I saw that another episode of The Roost came out where you're talking turkeys with Ben O'Brien. And this is actually something you recorded last year?
Yeah, so last February, end of February, we recorded 8 episodes of kind of a to Z, nuts to bolts turkey series as a way for people who, whether you are a beginner or like have done it for a long time, we wanted you to be able to learn something. So we kind of ran through, started with a state of the union of the turkeys, kind of an intro, to all of that and kind of what we have learned over the last few years of declines in some states and that kind of thing. And then we took it through and we got to talk to a pile of experts on everything from turkey biology with Dr. Mike Chamberlain to calling with Aaron Warbritton to gear with Lake Pickle and tips and tactics with Dave Owens and Jason Hart, and we had Will Primos on. I mean, it was a very cool collaboration of guys talking about everything turkey hunting. So recorded it last spring, and it went out to Ben O'Brien's subscribers to his Woodside Premium podcast, and then we released it to the public. It just started about a month ago, and all 8 episodes will be available. And then we are doing Roost 2.0 coming up. So we recorded a State of the Union Turkey edition for this year, and then we'll have a bunch of episodes coming out, and we're doing a 4-state Western Turkey tour coming up here in about, I guess, just under a month. We'll kick that off.
Oh wow! Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But a few more of these episodes from last year will be coming out for free for people too. Be out for everybody.
Every Thursday, a new episode drops, and that's everything we recorded last year. So we wanted to get it out there so everybody could listen to it. But yeah, we like to think it was a really, kind of fun podcast to record, and a lot of valuable information in there from people who are way better turkey hunters than both Ben and I. So,
well, it's a great idea, especially, just to not to get in, talk shop too much, but for a premium style podcast, just like an information based, 8 episodes or whatever it was, just a great way to try to put something out there for people and make a little bit of money. And, I'll ask this all for you guys when it comes to like podcasts like this one or that one or radio shows. Would you rather pay for something and not deal with commercials? Because everything now you can pay for stuff, videos, streaming, and get rid of ads, or watch or listen to something for free and have to put up with a couple of commercials.
I generally listen for free because I don't normally subscribe to something, or I'll listen to a few ads. That doesn't ever really bother me. So
yeah.
I'm cheap, so
and I'm cheap. Yeah.
Well, Sam, what do you think?
So I am of the mindset where I like how Ben does it with his. So he puts out a free episode every week on his Woodside podcast, but then he has a premium subscription so he can dive deeper on certain topics like this turkey, hunting stuff. So you kind of. If people want to hear like the basic overview of stuff, like there's free versions, kind of typically along the way, kind of an overview of stuff. And then if you really want to dive deep on a subject, I like the fact that you can, really, pay a little, it's not very much money, subscribe and really dive into it if you're a diehard. And I think that's the main thing, where the people who are subscribing, you're talking directly to a very focused audience. So I think that's kind of cool. And it's not for everybody, but it's certainly the people who listen. It was really cool to just hear the feedback from people who had subscribed and listened and really liked diving way into it all.
No, that's awesome. And the reason I'm asking is because we're considering kind of doing some subscription-based stuff too. And I just kind of want to get everybody's thoughts and listening habits.
I'd agree with that too. Like if it's something I really want to learn about,
sure.
I don't have a problem paying a couple bucks or whatever it is just to learn more.
Well, if it's going to be us who are getting paid, then absolutely, yeah, pay for podcasts. Subscribe to every single one of them. That changes the game here now.
For sure.
We got to clear this up.
Well, I think it would also give you guys the opportunity to, like pick a topic and really dive into it if you're able to have the funding. If you can get that subscriber base build up, you can really tackle subjects and stuff that you want to explain more about and really give people a lot of value in being able to listen to that. And you don't have to try to, get other sponsors to pay for a trip or whatever, so you can actually create the content. So there's but I like everything. It's just a balance.
Yeah. And man, I would love to do that. I love our sponsors. Like we have great sponsors on the show. And I'm not just saying that because they're our sponsors, but they're all friends of mine. They're all products or places we love. And I just hate selling advertising. Just to throw it all out there. So if anybody's watching and listening to this and want to advertise on the show, just call me and we'll figure something out. Because I hate asking for people for money, which I guess you're doing on a subscription-based service. But at least there, you can just put your content out, and then if people want to listen to it, they can just pay for it, and then it makes things a little bit easier sometimes. But I don't know. I think how you described what Ben does, where he has some free content and some paid content, that's probably like a hybrids type thing. It's probably what I would do too. Obviously, this show would continue on the way it is, but I've got a couple other podcasts, some other projects in the works that I might put on a subscription service. So kind of feeling people out to see how they feel about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to talk real quick though. Where do people find that again? The Roost. Where can people get that? And when is when are the new episodes coming out?
So you can find Roost Podcast on every streaming platform anywhere you find your podcast. So whether it be on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, you can go listen to it. The previous episodes come out every Thursday. We're recording the next new episode on the 11th, and then we'll do kind of weekly episodes all the way through the rest of the spring. So yeah, it should be fun. I think it's going to be cool. We're going to be able to do a lot of like turkey hunting stories and kind of dive into it on that side. And we're going to have, like obviously from our big tour and trip, we're going to have a lot of cool content coming out, like, reels and videos and different stuff. And then we are doing we got something really cool in the works that's coming out relatively soon here in the next couple weeks, doing a pretty cool collaboration with, it's just, I can't say, I know, I can't, close. I can't say much more.
So close.
It is turkey related. It's conservation related. It's education related. So we've got a bit of a bundle coming out. So keep your eyes peeled on my stuff and Public Land Tees and Ben's stuff. And it's going to be fun.
All right, very cool. Well, we got to for the radio show, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back more with Sam Soholt. If you're listening to the podcast or watching it, we're not going to take a break for you. But if you're on the radio show, we'll be right back.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX.
We're back. This is Sporting Journal Radio. I'm Brett Amundsen. Thanks for tuning in on the network, by demand, sportingjournalradio.com, or by watching this on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, share it, smash that. Do people still say that? Smash that like button?
You don't hear it too often anymore.
Well, smash that like button anyway. Check us out on YouTube and subscribe. Got a couple new YouTube channels, by the way. Fish Hunt Forever is our new hunting and fishing video channel. Got some cool stuff on there. Trip to Niagara River, fishing out there. We also just put up one from Lake of the Woods recently where we did some ice fishing. Met some really cool people. I mean, it's ice fishing at Lake of the Woods, but we kind of have some neat stories in there as well, too, and got pizza delivered on the ice.
Best part, hands down.
Which was kind of cool.
How do you beat that?
Check it out, Fish Hunt Forever on YouTube. I guess Sam Soholt right now. Sam, it's turkey season, but if you look out the window, it doesn't really look like it.
No, it does not. I don't know. So my wife does travel occupational therapy. So we spent 3 months of winter down in northern Missouri. So it was basically a non-winter compared to North Dakota. That was great. Got out of it. And then we're like, we're coming back at the end of February, early March. Typically things start to change a little bit. And then we went on our 3-week honeymoon. We're like, by the time we get back, it'll be spring. And we've got another like 12 to 15 inches coming next week. So I'm just praying for a slow warm up at this point, so we don't get a major flood going again this year.
Now, we're in Minnesota here, obviously. We got a lot of snow on the ground. We were down, I traveled up to North Dakota. I traveled down to the border of Nebraska recently, and you can see, the snow line was kind of retreating, and then obviously another snowstorm hit, but or is hitting, depending on when you're watching this or listening to this. How often have you hunted with, because now you're up by Fargo, right?
Yep.
Still up there? How much snow is up there, and how much snow have you turkey hunted in before?
So right now, I mean, the piles in front of our house are 6 to 8 feet tall. I would say as a base, there's 30 some inches, like just on the ground everywhere. And and then, but as far as turkey hunting in the snow, I mean, like I don't turkey hunt because I want to hunt in the winter. Like I have the coldest I've turkey hunted in was we got a giant snowstorm rolled through northern Nebraska, and we got like 15 inches of snow or whatever. And then the next morning it was 9 degrees, and a buddy and I, it was that early archery season, and a buddy and I went out and sat in the blind when it was that cold, and he did kill a bird, but birds did not gobble at all. They came off the roost, and the first time we had any idea that they were even closer, we could hear birds drumming back behind the blind, and then they came into the decoys, and he was able to shoot one in that. So got cool photos in the snow, but man, like I don't aspire to hunt turkeys in a giant snowbank. Like I'm gonna have to, like, if like opening day is the 8th here in North Dakota, and I have a turkey tag, but I'm going to have to wear a snow ghillie suit and go in on cross country skis if I want to get into, and they're all going to be flocked up. And
that'd be an amazing video though, Sam. You got to do that.
I might just have to just because, like, just see if I can pull it off.
Have you ever turkey hunted on cross country skis before?
Not yet.
Oh,
Has
man.
Anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You could snowshoe in too.
You could, but
I could, but I think
do it for
might
the
be
gram.
might be a little stealthier on cross country skis, like just kind of glide across the snow.
You got to put carpet on your snowshoes. That's how you keep them quiet.
I'll have to get that like snow tape for the poles, as I go in. Yeah.
That snow, I was out in the backyard checking on my propane tank that apparently I went through 200 gallons of propane in 7 weeks, which I think is a bit aggressive.
Been cold.
And
There might be a leak.
I haven't even been home. That's the thing. Like most of the time, I haven't been home. The thermostat's been on I think that one day, that one trip, I think I had the thermostat on 55 and burned through all the propane. Anyway, I walked out there to check the tank today, and the snow is so hard and crunchy right now. I don't even know if you could get cross-country skis across it, first of all, but there'd be zero stealth.
Yeah, no.
There'd be zero stealth with it.
It doesn't help either that the full moon is on the 5th. And so, like, can you imagine, going in like the morning, like you'd just be glowing. Like with the reflect, you wouldn't need a headlamp, which is nice.
Right.
But
Who uses those?
Dan never brings a headlamp. Overrated. So if with the experience that you've had hunting when there's been snow, because I remember, in Minnesota here, everybody used to try to get season A. Back when you could only get that, you had to draw for it, and it seemed like everybody wanted that first season. And then there were a couple years where it was a lot of snow in that first season, and those guys that had that tag were like, dang it. But if you're stuck, like maybe you got a trip planned or whatever, and you're out there in snow, like, what do you tell somebody? Like, what other than snow camo and cross country skis? What are you going to tell them about decoys or calling or any of that stuff?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the region, right? Like the further south you can be, obviously birds are going to be a little bit more fired up earlier in the season, but if you're way north country, if you're stuck to a specific season, I would say, I don't know how hard I would push in on the roost super early in the, try to be there in the morning. Cause, especially right now, they're going to be flocked up quite a bit. And then, a lot of times when it's really cold, especially if you get any precipitation, they're going to stay on roost longer. So there's no reason to like go barreling in somewhere and just freeze your ass off sitting on the snowbank, waiting for them to come down from roost. So, I would probably try to hunt maybe that, like wait till they're down and kind of, get an idea of where they're going to be or think about where they're going, like try to find if there's food that might be a little bit more, defrosted, I guess, if you can find a field close by or ag that has been, the wind has blown off the snow, or if there's been enough sunshine to kind of break some of that loose, go wait for them to head to that direction rather than trying to bust them off the roost because they will be so flocked up.
So you have time to go ice fishing in the morning.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
The other downfall of snow is it's not like a nice 50-degree morning. It's like 20 or 30 degrees. It's cold.
Right. Yeah. So layers, I guess, would be the other tip.
Well, and I mean, if you're setting up, I don't know if you're hunting, if you're just spotting, just running and gunning, or if you're trying to set up and hide somewhere. I mean, are you carving out a snow cave?
Yeah. How fast can you build a snow fort?
I mean, honestly, it would probably work pretty well if you could cut blocks and kind of put them up in front of you a little bit. It'd be a pretty amazing blind, to shoot from behind. But
half an igloo with a window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A shooting window.
The one benefit is the decoys would be super visible.
Oh, sure.
From anywhere. So just put up a strutter decoy, even if you're a half mile from the roost, if you could, walk in there and put that up, everything's going to see it.
It's starting to sound not so bad.
Yeah.
Go hunt the snow.
See?
Everyone else go hunt A and B season.
That's right.
Yeah. I'll be busy.
That's right.
But someone else can go do it.
Man, I got real excited. We were traveling. So I still got snow geese on the brain, and we were chasing snows here recently in the southern half of South Dakota, and we were coming up a hill, and right on top of the hill was, I don't know, what was there? Did you guys all see those turkeys? There's like 7 or 8 toms, just right on the side of the road, and one of them was in full strut, and I was like, oh. Got me all excited.
Oh yeah, gets the heart going.
Yeah,
it's time.
Sure. So you got at least a 4-state trip planned for turkeys. You going to do any other traveling for turkey hunting?
Yep. So we'll see how the cross country hunt goes. But then I'm going down to southern Iowa with some buddies. And we're going to hunt down and hunt Iowa for 4 or 5 days. I guess it's the 14th through the 18th is that second season. And then from there, I'll drive out to the Black Hills in South Dakota. I've got a photo shoot for Savage out there. I did pick up a Wyoming turkey tag, so that was more of a just in case thing, so I can hunt the Black Hills side in Wyoming.
Oh, cool! That'd be awesome.
If I have the time, I would love to spend a day or day and a half in there trying to knock down a bird out there and get a Merriam's. But then I'll go to Salt Lake for a couple days. Where my wife's next rotation is. And then I'll rip up to Bozeman and meet up with Ben and Nick Andrews, who's currently filming for The Hunting Public. We hired him to film a bunch of stuff for us. And then we are taking off and we'll start ripping around the West.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I've never really done much in Wyoming, but I might have a turkey hunt I might film a turkey hunt in Wyoming there, in northeastern Wyoming. So I'm kind of excited about that, just to go out. Hunting would be great, but I think it'd be really cool to film out there.
For sure.
Kind of looking forward to that. All right, Sam, we got to take another quick break. More with Sam Soholt when we come back on Sporting Journal Radio, on the radio show, or on the podcast. Stay there.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Otter Tail County?
Yep, and I'm going to fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Otter Tail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Otter Tail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter.
To find your inner otter, go to OttertailLakesCountry.com.
All right, we're back. Sporting Journal Radio. Thanks for tuning in on the radio show right here on the Sporting Journal Radio Network. By demand, sportingjournalradio.com, or maybe downloading the podcast or watching this on YouTube. David Arcart, Dan Amundsen with me as well. And our guest is Sam Soholt. We're talking turkeys right now. And we're going to have a few minutes here with Sam, and then we're going to go to the podcast with him, and we'll have a fishing report with Joe Henry for you on the radio. You listeners on the radio will have that for you. And we'll have it on the podcast too, but we're going to have an extended interview with Sam continue on the podcast or YouTube version of Sporting Journal Radio. Sam, I want to talk about your trip to New Zealand because, God, it's just got to be epic. I didn't realize that was your third time there, so we'll talk about what you did on your third trip there and, what recommendations, what advice you give to people about why they'd want to go. And since you've been there a couple of times, you kind of already knew, maybe you had some ideas of what you wanted to do. So I want to break down all that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about land access because obviously you're a big public land advocate, which is huge for public access. And to me, I mean, obviously there's a lot of factors that goes into hunter retention, hunter recruitment, hunter reactivation, if you want to start talking R3s. There's a lot of factors. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of tools you can use. But I think I think land access is undervalued when it comes to that. People put a lot of emphasis on other aspects of the R3 movement, but I think having places to go and good places to hunt, at least adequate places to hunt, opportunities to go out there and walk for pheasants, or climb into a tree to try to shoot a deer, or whatever the case may be. Having that access, having that opportunity. Obviously, you want to have mentors that can maybe introduce you to those kind of things. But having places to go, and as you see more and more land get developed, or more and more land get purchased by private owners, which I'm not going to knock them, because honestly, I would love to own my own nice little chunk of prime hunting land. Of course, I think everybody loves to have that dream, but all of us here have spent a lot of time on public land, and public land is really, really important. But now you're also starting to see various states and provinces change the amount of licenses that are available for non-residents. And I want to get your opinion on what the future looks like when you restrict some more non-resident hunting opportunity, and if that is going to benefit the resource in the long run, or if that's going to decrease opportunity for hunters and in turn decrease hunters and hunter numbers in the long run. What do you think about that?
So this is just a theory that I have. And so I could be way off base here with the actual science behind it all. But I think one of the reasons that we're seeing this shift in the way state agencies are managing the states and provinces is, and maybe not so much for provinces in Canada because the border was shut down for a while, but in the states, you're starting to see restrictions on turkey tags in certain states. You're seeing restrictions on deer tags. You're seeing changes in the way laws are written in Western states for big, elk and different stuff, and how many tags they're actually allocating. And I don't know this for sure, but when you had that giant boom in COVID of the number of people, not only in the field, but the number of people applying, because all of a sudden people had time on their hands to, say, oh, well, now I actually remember to apply for this tag, or now I have time to go do this, or I can work remotely, or I can do this. So you had this giant increase of people in the field when the infrastructure of public land access wasn't quite ready for it. So obviously we want more hunters into the fold, because that adds to dollars in the pot for habitat and access and all of those things. But when it happens too quickly, what happens is you have overcrowding on these public lands. You have bad apples in the mix that ruin it for everybody, where public land access, whether it be walking area or someone had a bad experience or whatever, and people take their land out of block manager or out of walk-in or whatever because they don't want people covering their property. So you had this perfect storm that was good for the pot overall, but now states are having to have a reactionary stance on these things and change laws to make sure that the resource is still available for us going, down the road. So I think I would like to hope that it'll balance out as people go back to work and we start to figure out how to deal with all these new hunters. And I think what's happening is the states are reacting to what happened over the last couple of years. Now, you asked what I thought that meant for public land access. I think if done properly, and you hate to talk bad about, state governments are doing the best they can. Typically, it's
sometimes.
Slow. Sometimes. I'm trying to paint this in a positive light, because I like to believe that the states have hunters in their best interest. That's not always true. A lot of times it is money driven. But I would like to most of the time. But I would like to believe that there are people in those positions that are trying to manage it in a way that will benefit and protect the resource for future generations. Now, I think what will happen, and what probably needs to happen, is as far as public land access goes, we need to see expansion in states so in North Dakota, you have the PLOTS program, which is private land open to sportsmen.
Hey, Sam, I'm going to pause you there real quick, and our audience on the radio show is going to be real mad at me, but we got to go to Joe Henry of the Fishing Port on the radio show. If you want to hear more of our discussion with Sam Soholt about public land access and hunter numbers and his trip to New Zealand, make sure you download the podcast or go watch this on YouTube right now.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.
All right, Sam, sorry to interrupt you there. Go back. You were talking about the PLOTS program in North Dakota.
Yeah. So when you look at federal and state managed public lands, so you have, at the federal level, you have waterfowl production areas, you have national forests, national parks. Obviously you can't hunt on national parks, but there's large BLM, you have large swaths of public land. And then at the state level, typically you're looking at, I guess the states probably manage all of the waterfowl production areas, but you have school sections, you have different, you have state game production areas, that kind of thing. And adding to that amount of land is a very difficult thing to do because the funding is hard to appropriate, and B, there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to purchasing land to then turn over to the public. That typically has to be done at the private level. Things like what Pheasants Forever does with the Build a Wildlife Area campaigns, where they buy chunks of private, manage the habitat on it, turn it back over to the public. But I think the next biggest thing that we can do, and one of the biggest hurdles for people getting into hunting, or even people who are currently hunting, is like you said before, having access to good places to go hunt. So I think the next frontier, or what can be rapidly expanded to kind of spread people out on the landscape and allow people to have a higher quality experience, is these private land access initiatives. So in North Dakota, like I said, you have the PLOTS program. In South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, you have walk-in areas.
In Minnesota.
And in South Dakota, they're working on the Aberdeen Pheasant Coalition did it first, which was it's community access funding. So what that means is businesses within Aberdeen, South Dakota added money into a pot, and then working with Pheasants Forever and locals, they were able to incentivize landowners to put their land in a CRP program or in walk-in area for an extended period of time for that one-time payment. And in 1 year alone, they opened up 4,000 acres of walk-in area. Now, they're going to work on expanding that statewide, and I think other states can learn from that. I think it's going to be a way to open up lots and lots of access for the general public at a fairly minimal cost. And I had a conversation with Tony Peterson, who works at Meat Eater. We just had a long conversation when I was driving one day, and he was talking about, he's like, states have proven time and time again that they will charge non-resident hunters an exorbitant amount of money to hunt the state. And that's where a lot of the funding comes from for the biologists that manage everything, access, all of those things. So why not, if you're already going to charge non-residents a bunch of money, why not have a chunk of that go directly into a pot that goes directly towards access, and that's all it goes towards. So, it might be a way to help non-residents chew off a $1,000 elk tag or a $500 deer tag if they know that, say, 10% of that money is going into an access fund that will pay private landowners to allow access for people to hunt on, or have it be like a block management thing that they do in Montana, where the landowner gets paid every time someone signs in to hunt that property. That type of expansion. And I think the more that we can do that, I think these, the ruffling of feathers between residents and non-residents and state agencies trying to manage all of this, this juggling act of making sure that everybody's having a quality experience while still protecting the resource, I think that alleviates a lot of that pressure on all of those things.
So how do you get that done? Because, in Minnesota, we have to buy, I think it's a $4 validation to hunt walk-in access land. And that's mostly, I think, to track who's using the walk-in land, but obviously helping to fund it a little bit as well. They get majority of their money from somewhere else. I can't remember where it comes from right now, but and then you can volunteer. If I remember correctly, you can volunteer to donate more. And I always always donate more because I take advantage of those walk-in access. I spent 10 years in North Dakota, and the plots land was my favorite. Like, we did so much hunting on plots land up there, and so when I moved back to Minnesota and saw that there was kind of a similar program, smaller in scale, but private land open to hunting via the walk-in access program, I thought, man, this is great. I want to support it, even if I don't get a chance to hunt it much, or I don't have a lot of it around where I'm at. But I travel across the state a little bit. I ended up bumping into some of the areas that are open to hunting. That's on private land through that program, and I think it's great. So, how does it work in other states? Because North Dakota, you can just hunt it, right? You don't have to pay to get on plots land or anything.
Nope. So it's free to get on plots. When you buy any tag, there is you can donate to the plots program, and I think is kind of cool. I always add, whatever, 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks, regardless of what license I'm buying, I just always add to it. And I think the way that you would have to fund it, especially if they continue to limit, non-resident number of tags or whatever, I think what would typically happen is there's going to be an increase in resident tag fees kind of across the board. But I think there's creative ways to do it, to fund these things. You can, there's always ways to match donations. There's companies that are looking to donate money, regardless if it's for a tax write-off or whatever the purpose is behind it, whatever the motivation is behind giving money to charitable programs. I think there's a way that you can make the dollar go farther. So if it's make it an opt-out thing where if you go in to buy your license, you can opt out of that $5 extra charge if you want, but have it kind of added in there if you're willing, and know that money is going to go into that fund. And then find donors and work with conservation organizations that know of donors and know of companies who want to help match that funding. And so you can grow that pot very quickly and then spend that money on incentivizing landowners to open it up to walk-in access for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever the basis of the terms are.
And South Dakota actually started something similar to this. I don't know if it necessarily it doesn't necessarily stay that it's going to go to like a walk-in access program, but they came up with that habitat stamp that everybody kind of complained about at first, because I got to pay for non-residents. I got to pay another $25 to do this or whatever. But it does go to fund wildlife habitat developments and public access improvements on public lands across South Dakota, establishing nesting and brood ring cover, tree and shrub plantings, food plots, and hunting access trails, and also used to provide public hunting access to provide public hunting access to private lands that offer quality hunting opportunities. So do we try to increase that? Is there a way to try to push some of these other states to create something similar to that? And how do you think, say you're going to Montana as a non-resident to hunt, where you might be paying $1,000 to go hunt there, and they've been in the news. I think they were the first state that I really started to hear about restrictions on non-resident tags in recent years, anyway. How do you think somebody, if they're already paying a lot of money for that, and all of a sudden you see another $25 or whatever, how do you think that'll go over? And do you think there just needs to be a clear explanation, and most hunters will go along with it?
Yeah, I mean, any price increase never goes over well, and I don't think we can. Just like the general public, we can't tax people into submission,
right.
And that's what it feels like. And I think what we've done wrong, or we've done a very poor job of, and I learned way more about this when promoting duck stamp sales and purchasing duck stamps and trying to raise money, is that most people had no idea where the money went in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's when 98% of the money is going directly to wetlands. So
the best program we have, the best
right.
one.
Yeah, but the fact that the general hunting public really, I'll be totally honest, I was completely naive to how conservation funding worked until I really dove into it and did the research on my own. So that's been a big part of what I've done, what we've done at Public Land Tees, is just try to educate people on how important all of these things are. Yeah. And then it seems like once people understand that money is going to fund the thing that you love to do, it's way easier to swallow, like that price point of a tag or a license or a duck stamp or a, you know, a volunteering to go buy the Mossy Oak turkey stamp, or, you know, whatever it might be. Once people understand that the funding actually, the good that it actually does, it's easier for them to really dive into it and not feel so bad.
Isn't it funny about that too? Because I remember growing up, you know, it was always like, what's the least amount of things I need to buy to go do this? Right? Like, what's the least amount of licenses that I need to pay for, you know, to go do this? And then as you get older, it's like, oh, well, if I buy the volunteers, you know, the like the walleye stamp, if I get the you know, I never used to get the walleye stamp, but I love to walleye fish because I'm like, gosh, they're already charging me enough. But when you start to realize where that money goes, just like you said, it's a no-brainer. Now, you know, anything that's available here in Minnesota, I just check. Anything that can volunteer that will put money towards habitat conservation, I just do it because I know we need that habitat that's out there. So it's easy for me to do that. It's nice that there are the opportunities to donate like that too.
Right. You know, and before I really dove into understanding all of the conservation funding, you know, when people would complain about tag fees or whatever, I always tried to relate the recreational value, like the value that I get from hunting. So I always tried to relate it to concert tickets. And so, you know, like, so, you know, if I'm going to go, like, you know, I like country music, I like rock music or whatever. So if I'm going to pay $75 to $100 to go watch 3 hours of music.
Right.
Right. And, you know, when you buy your resident tags, I mean, I think North Dakota's like, I don't know the prices right off the top of my head. Let's say it's $50 for your, you know, general tag, another $50 for your deer tag, another $50, you know, like say it's $150. Okay. Well, that's 6 hours of entertainment value that I would have paid for to go to a couple concerts, but I get to hunt for like
the whole season,
200 days if I want, you know, spring and fall. And so, I mean, the amount of value that I get from spending a minimal amount of money, is like the price to value ratio is so good when you talk about outdoor recreation. So I just don't, I mean, and I know that money's going to pay for the biologists that do the counts on turkeys and pheasants and deer, and then they can figure out tag structures and all that kind of stuff. It's not hard to justify the cost when you understand it or relate it to something that, you know, like that you would spend a bunch of money on.
That's a great way to put it in perspective for people as well too. Now, not everybody's going to be able to hunt 200 days. And I think sometimes that's where you run into the problems when you got, you know, the guys that only hunt on the weekends, or maybe they take one hunting trip, you know, a year or whatever the case may be. I think that's where you run into issues once in a while. And kind of along those same, you know, the same line there is, you know, when you talk about non-resident restrictions, I lived in North Dakota in 2000, and that was right around when the Minnesota-North Dakota war was going on about non-residents coming over to fish in Minnesota, non-residents, you know, the blue platers going over with a duck boat behind their truck going into North Dakota. And it was like, they hated each other. And it was like, well, if you're going to do this, I'm going to do this. And they all put in different regulations regarding non-residents, and, you know, things have kind of settled down. But what we've got is 2 weeks for non-residents. And honestly, I haven't hunted North Dakota since I moved out of it. And part of that is because of some time restrictions, but a lot of that is because I'm traveling other places, so I don't really have the opportunity to go as much. But I miss hunting North Dakota. But when you think about restricting non-residents to 2 weeks, you know, or you know, non-residents can't hunt the first week of the pheasant season, you know, so you give those residents the opportunity to, you know, have the opening day tradition, hunt with their family, hunt their lands before, you know, the throng, because obviously the Dakotas get hammered by non-residents because they're great states for the outdoors. Is, you know, instead of necessarily limiting tags, is, you know, maybe limiting, you know, pushing back the non-resident opener a week, or, you know, limiting it to two weeks. You know, like Manitoba, they just came up with 7 days now for non-residents for waterfowl hunters. A lot of people are up in arms about it, and I get it. You know, how many people take trips longer than 7 days or go multiple trips to Manitoba to duck hunt? I'm sure there's some. guys like in this room and like you, Sam, take multiple hunting trips all the time. We're probably in the minority in a lot of that. So how big of an effect will this have? It's hard to say, but they're also, going to implement a lottery for non-resident hunters first year for sure. It's going to be 100% successful. I've been told it's always going to be 100% successful. I'd like to think that that's going to be true. They say it's to keep non-residents essentially from locking up all the land so that the residents lose out on hunting opportunities there in their province. How do you feel about protecting, like North Dakota protecting resident hunting opportunities by limiting non-residents to 2 weeks, or South Dakota limits waterfowl hunters to a draw? Now they're going to limit, some public land archery options for whitetail. Obviously you can't compare each state and do one thing for everybody, but do you think there's some value in that versus reducing opportunity, maybe just reduce time length or push the non-resident opener back a week, et cetera?
Yeah, so I'll probably get a little bit of hate for this, but I am 100% in favor of states protecting the residents. It's people who live in the state, they pay taxes in the state, they spend, the majority of their time in state, spending money with local businesses. So I 100% understand it, and I agree with it. And you brought up the example of limiting non-resident waterfowlers in South Dakota, and there's a lot of people that are pissed off about that. And to me, I grew up in South Dakota, and then I went to school in North Dakota, so I got to see both sides of how that all works, right? So even though they limit the time in North Dakota, there's still a lot, like way more non-residents that come in and waterfowl hunt in North Dakota. And what I will tell you is the difference is the quality of the experience that you get to have because of the limitation. And because they limit the waterfowling in South Dakota, there isn't a bunch of land that's locked up by non-residents and, for outfitters and that kind of thing. So people who are coming in to hunt, if you were lucky enough to draw the tag, it's a way better hunt. And so I think, I understand people being pissed off about it, but I personally, I would rather manage for quality than the number of days that I can go hunt. If I know that when I'm there for 10 days or, 2 5-day periods or whatever it is, I know that I'm going to have a kick-ass experience because it's been managed for that. Now, I think it can lead to a lot of frustration, but I do appreciate the fact that they protect the people who chose to live there, so that they move there to hunt and fish. There's not, there's, for people that love that, for people that love the outdoors, there's not a lot of really good reasons to live in the Dakotas.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's a tough one because, obviously all of us like to travel to really cool places to hunt. So it gets frustrating when you're limited by days or limited by available licenses and things like that. But at the same time, where I live, on a busy weekend or MEA or opener, it's like, especially like during pheasant season, you just see guys everywhere. And it's like, I don't even hunt. On busy weekends, I don't even hunt. Outside my back door, particularly if I'm hunting public land, and I hunt a lot of public land in the fall, I don't even go because it's so busy. So I totally understand protecting it for the people that live and work there and pay the taxes there. I just worry, where's the fine line? Where's that balance of restriction to the point where it does create that quality experience so that you're not traveling to go somewhere and then you're getting beat to every spot. Like that's gonna stop somebody from going to do it, maybe stop somebody from trying that activity ever again. Yeah. But if they also can't draw a tag, you know what I'm saying? Like where is that fine line? Is it working in North Dakota the way they're doing it in South Dakota? Is what's going to happen in I'm curious to see what's going to happen in Manitoba and if the other provinces follow suit up there because, if waterfowl hunters start getting restricted in Alberta and Saskatchewan too, it's going to be like, whoa, there's a lot because those guys don't hunt as much up there in Canada. There's a lot more Americans that come up and waterfowl hunt up there in Canada. And I understand protecting it for those guys, but there's going to be a lot of American money that's going to stop going up there if they all make these, the 7 days just seems like a bit of an extreme restriction for me.
Yeah, and there was an interesting choice by Canada. I mean, not only you mentioned the fact that residents don't spend as much days in the field, but like, and you said a lot of American money going north, right? And that's not just from hunters. If you look at the amount of money that organizations are spending in Canada, Delta Waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited, the literal billions of dollars that have flowed north of the border from organizations that are based in the U.S., to increase habitat, protect habitat, basically funding the duck factory, or helping fund the duck factory. It's an interesting move by Canada, and I can understand it, but I'm surprised that they didn't. I'm surprised that they didn't either grandfather in people who have bought property up there.
I think they did. I think they actually did. There was a landowner legacy license, I believe, or something like that.
Okay. But then on top of that, I'm surprised, and then this would be a slippery slope too, but I'm surprised, like let's take, if you're a non-resident who upland hunts in South Dakota, if you buy a license, you get 2 5-day periods, but you can buy as many of those as you want. So you could hunt all season. You just got to be willing to spend the $127 several times.
Right.
So
which is a good idea. Sure.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that Canada didn't put in, because most people are going to go hunt 5 to 7 days. 5 to 7 days of waterfowling, you're unless you know what I mean.
Weeks.
Like, but if you go hard for 7 days of waterfowling, you're crushed. It's a long trip, and for most people, that is going to be like their trip of the year. Now, I'm surprised that Canada didn't put into place like, okay, you apply for a license, you get 7 days, but then have a fee, that if you wanted to extend that, or if you're planning on spending 30 days in Canada or whatever, then it costs you, X number of dollars. And then that just goes into their pot, it helps fund everything that they do. So, and most people wouldn't pay that. A lot of people would grumble about it, but there's also a lot of people that would say, yeah, sure. Like I get, tons of value, and I can, I can do this. And again, I don't want to keep adding cost onto the hunter, because at some point we need to,
there's a balance there too.
There is.
Pricing things out for them.
Right. I want as much opportunity for as many people as possible, because I never want it to be like Europe, where it's a rich man's sport. Like that is not the goal, and that's going to take, the collective to make sure that doesn't happen. But, I think you're spot on though. I think there's a balance between, and that's the hard part, right? The balance between restrictions, but still protecting the resource, but still managing for quality, and there's really only there's only two tools that states have when it comes to managing the resource. And that is season length and tag allocation. So those are and they react based on the influx of hunters. And, if there's a bad weather event, like there's only 2 tools that they really have to take care of that. So you got to look at it from their perspective too, and say, oh, there's really not many options for them. And they just kind of like shift those up and down depending on all of the other factors that they see going into it.
Well, and that Manitoba deal, that the draw, that's going to be 100% successful. What I've been told is that was mainly put in place so they could track like the amount of hunters and the number of licenses and things like that, just to give them a better system for tracking. So, but in the verbiage that I read, it said, it'll be evaluated, down the road to see, how things are working. So they have the ability to change and tweak things if they need to. So
there might be a little more that we don't know about. You mentioned, not wanting to become like Europe, becoming a rich man's sport. I'm starting to have a bad hunch that's exactly what Canada wants, and that there might be an ulterior motive to this and just trying to keep America and guns out. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. I feel like this is almost on a different level than like the South Dakota deer deal and the Nebraska turkey deal, and some of our states just trying to keep non-residents out to protect hunting. I wonder if Canada's not doing a little something just to keep guns out or something.
Well, it is the Queen's land.
Exactly.
King's
right?
Yeah.
King's land now. Yeah.
Exactly though.
Well, I will say Canada is very good about protecting Canadian business. I mean, everybody thinks about America being America first. Canada is Canada first, for sure. And, anyone that has, does some freelance work, you're always careful that you're by the book with everything that you do when you go into Canada, because they always want that job to be offered to a Canadian first. So Canada is very business first. So they're obviously going to have a number of tags available for outfitters. So I think this is maybe more of a way to get them to use the outfitters.
I hope so.
And that way the freelancers will have a chance to bounce around a little bit, but the outfitters will, and the residents then will not have to worry about as many freelancers, and then all the other non-residents will have to go through the outfitters, and the outfitters will get the business, and the outfitters will do it on the land that they already have, that's already for the most part established. And they also reduce the number, if I get this correct, they reduce the number of licensed waterfowl outfitters. So they got rid of some guys that weren't using their allotment of days. They got rid of some of the outfitters that maybe weren't following the regulations to the T the way they were supposed to. So I think it's down to like 60 licensed Manitoba waterfowl outfitters that'll be a part of this, that'll have tags. So we'll see what the future holds. And Sam, we could talk about public access probably for a few hours here, but let's give our listeners a break from that and talk about being a non-resident and traveling to an island called New Zealand to do. Did you do some hunting over there this time, or was it just kind of a let's go bungee jumping and hang out on the island, drink some cold ones on the beach? What did you do over there?
So my whole life revolves around hunting, fishing, the outdoors, photography, video. And this New Zealand trip was solely recreation. It wasn't related to hunting. I fished a couple days, but this was my wife and I's 3-week honeymoon that we wanted to take in 2020 before the world shut down. And it was honestly just fun to go. It was fun to go on a trip and recreate for the sake of recreation. So this was like, we covered the whole South Island. We rented a car and drove all over the place. The photo that's being shown right now is from the Milford Sound. And the Milford Sound, I just want to explain it a little bit. So you drive we stayed in a place called Te Anau, which is kind of like about an hour from Milford Sound. But the day that we drove in, we were driving through a huge rainstorm. And what happens in a big rainstorm is you have these granite cliffs all around you on the drive in, and waterfalls that wouldn't normally exist show up because of all the rain coming down. So you're driving past literally thousands of waterfalls coming down. And It's just like, it's next world. It looks like a fantasy land. It is so freaking cool. And so, yeah, we just bounced around the South Island, flew into Christchurch and, hopped on a train and went up into the Southern Alps and hiked to a waterfall and then, drove back down to Christchurch, and on the way, swung by, there's a really weird like rock formation that's a whole bunch of limestone rocks that were deposited from the last ice age. And it's where they filmed like the battle scene from one of the Narnia movies, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then we went to Dunedin and hung out on the beach. And then there's the steepest road in the world is in Dunedin, New Zealand. It's like a 36% grade. And so it's wild. Yeah. It's just like straight up. Went to Queenstown and hung out in Queenstown, did a couple really cool hikes. You hike 4,700 vertical feet in 5 miles. And so it's basically just like you walk straight up for 5 miles and get to the top, and you can see endless Southern Alps and glaciers as far as you can, look out to. And, we bungee jumped off the, I forget the name of the bridge. It's like the Wakararu Bridge or whatever.
How'd that go?
Yeah, right. It's a 43 meter drop. So it's, about 150 feet. And that was incredible. We'd rented bikes the day before and did a big tour through this little town called Arrowtown. And we biked across the bridge and saw some people bungee jumping, and actually watched a woman jump, and she hit the bottom of the bungee and her shoes flew off and then floated down the river, never to be seen again. So,
No.
but we signed up for the next morning, and then, we went and jumped off, and man, it's just that absolute rush. But
if you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, you can see Sam bungee jump in the video there. Go ahead, Sam.
No, I think, one of the funniest things that happened on the trip is, so if anybody knows anything about New Zealand, it is like the sheep capital of the world. So if anybody wears merino wool, the best merino comes from New Zealand. And like, because of the climate and the way it must be the nutrients in the climate, but it creates a smaller micron. So like a softer wool. And so like, apparently the best merino comes from New Zealand, but there are not only merino sheep, but there are sheep everywhere. Like, I mean, we drove 3,500 kilometers on the odometer on the rig that we rented down there. Wow. And I bet we saw 2 million sheep in our just driving around. I mean, they're everywhere, but these
are like eggs, like farm sheep.
Domestic sheep. Yep. And so, but we were driving between Dunedin and Queenstown, and I was following this little truck pulling a trailer, and all of a sudden a sheep gets tumbles under the tires of this trailer, and it's laying on the road, in front of us. And then I was like, what is going on? And I thought a sheep had come out from the field and got hit by a car or hit by this truck in front of us. Well, this truck pulls over, and I see the door of this little horse trailer fly open, and all these sheep go barreling out of this horse trailer, onto this little hillside. And I drove around the sheep that was on the road and pulled up to the guy, and he's out there in his New Zealand accent, like, "You bastards," yelling at the sheep. And so I was like, "You want help with any of this?" And he's like, "Just try to push him down the road a little bit," So we drove around him, and he's trying to get this door shut and get other sheep back corralled. And I drove up next to the sheep, and then he came up behind me, and then him and I drove kind of side by side down the road, and he's honking at the sheep, and we're yelling at him, and pushed these sheep down the road for a mile and a half, and a backup of traffic behind me, trying to figure out why I wasn't driving around this guy who was pushing sheep down the highway. But oh man, I just never thought I'd be herding sheep in New Zealand at some point.
How was travel getting there? And did those other 2 trips, did you do any hunting at all or anything, or is it just working?
Yeah. So the second trip, it was a chamois and tar hunt that I was the photographer. Okay. And so it was, I went there for Yeti and shot a bunch of photos. And Adam Greentree was one of the hunters. Ben O'Brien was the other hunter. And then I kind of got screwed out of my day of hunting, but that was more of on the guide. That's a whole other story. But we
tune in next week to Sporting Journal Radio.
Yeah. So that trip got to spend time way up, in the Alps, and do the helicopter thing, and cool. hiked up and killed Adam killed a tar. And then we drove and then hopped in a helicopter and flew up, and he killed a chamois. And then we flew up the next day, and it was going to be my turn to kill a chamois. And we they kind of put us in the gar hole. And then we hauled ass all the way down this ridge for a whole day. And we're 300 yards from a chamois in a good spot. And then Phil, the guy, was like, "Oh, yeah, I think it's time for the helicopter to come pick us up." I was like, "All right, I guess we're done here." But
that was a pretty good New Zealand accent, by the way.
Yeah,
I just want to say
it's better than the sheep guy.
Yeah, earlier it was
I couldn't swear like the New Zealand guy. I didn't want to on the radio, but
appreciate that.
Yeah. So, but no, do
you have to go through an outfitter if you hunt out there?
Nope. You can freelance down there, and
really?
I don't believe you need to buy a hunting license. You have to buy a fishing license if you fish, but I don't think there's actual tags for anything. It's just, you just have to, if you bring a gun, obviously you have to check your gun and have the police give you a permit for having a gun in country. But yeah, this time was just all about, traveling and recreating. And, but if anybody's traveling there, you need to make sure, when I got there, we brought a tent in case we camped, and I hadn't opened that tent in 2 years. And so they're like, "Oh, we got to check the tent." So they took it back in the lab or whatever to check for plant matter and stuff. And it was taking a while, and they came back with just the bundle of the tent, and they were like, "Well, there was a lot of plant matter in there, so we had to shake that out pretty good. So we didn't want to delay it anymore. So here's your tent." And it was just the fabric all put together. But no, it's if anybody's going to New Zealand because they're so protective of the island ecosystem. Just make sure your boots are spotless. Make sure all of your, hunting gear, camping gear is cleaned, wiped down. They're just trying to do their best to not have, another native species come in, because the rivers have, through the felt on fly fishermen's, the old boots that were mostly all felt bottom.
Yeah.
It brought in an invasive, and I don't know what it's called, but it kind of looks like long strands of snot that sits on the rocks.
Rock snot.
Yeah, I mean it's gross.
We just learned about that on Prairie Sportsman.
Oh,
rock
really?
Snot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. So yeah, but it got into a bunch of the rivers in New Zealand, and so now, like, if you get a big rainstorm, like we did one day when we were down there, I fished. Like, it was like a day and a half later, the rain had quit, but the rivers were still high, and I went and tried to fly fish, and it was like every third cast I had to be cleaning my fly or cleaning my line or whatever, because I was like picking up snot that was floating down the river. I was like, oh, this isn't even fun.
Well,
yeah.
Did your wife bungee jump?
She sure did.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was. So she went first. Just the way it worked out. Like there's 2 platforms you jump off. So she had gone to one, and so she jumped first, and she jumped and screamed the whole way down. And the guy turns to me and goes, "She's got a set of lungs on her, doesn't she?" I was like, "Yeah, yep."
She didn't lose her shoes, did she?
Didn't lose her shoes. Double knotted them. So
Okay, good.
What a bad mystery for some poor fisherman down the river that'd be.
Right?
Just a pair of shoes.
Find shoes covered in snot.
Yeah.
All right. Sam Soholt, check out the Roost podcast that's out there now. And what else? Anything else you want to plug right now, Sam?
No, I think just the Roost podcast, and keep an eye out for the pretty cool collaboration we got coming here right up.
Very good. Well, keep up the good work with everything that you do for public lands and hunting access, and fighting for our rights to continue what we're doing, what we like to do. And you'll have to make a hunting trip probably back to New Zealand one of these years. Maybe
I'll try to go
maybe
next
we'll all
year,
come with you.
Yeah, let's make it happen. I want to go
right.
back next spring.
Kodiak straight to New Zealand.
Oh, I like it.
Yes.
I like the way you think,
Yeah.
Dan. All right,
Yeah, the
Sam
time
Soholt.
was rough, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever. We'll find something else to do in between.
That's right. Yeah.
Sam Soholt, thanks for the time today on the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hear more at sportingjournalradio.com or wherever you get podcasts. 852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX.